Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. If you haven't followed us on Twitter, please go do that. Alex Wilson, ESM, Anthony_Rivardo, and smash that subscribe button on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes. We're bringing the best. We got the inside scoop this year with John Fennelly working with ESM. He's going to be at the games and the practices, at least in a minimal role, with however coronavirus limits us to get our information. Apparently, they're going to be doing some cool stuff in terms of social distancing interviews. So we also have the exclusive interviews from the Yankees, and they are doing everything through Zoom. So it's a little bit different. The Giants might be doing things more in person. We're not sure yet, but if we have all that inside stuff, you guys are going to be getting it. And we really are excited to provide that kind of information and inside information for you guys. But to get started, how are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing pretty good, just trying to hold out these last few weeks before I go back to school, getting pretty excited, and obviously I'm excited for some Giants training camp to begin. Those videos of Daniel Jones working out with the teammates of his were pretty cool, so definitely just excited all around.
Absolutely, and today I saw Sterling Shepard posted a picture of Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley with the word family attached to it. That's always a nice thing to see, especially right before training camp. It seems like they've been working out a lot together, which has really just warmed my heart because it seems like the continuity on the team the past few years just hasn't been there. And it finally feels like they're building something that's more based around a family orientation and not just paying to play. You know, like it didn't feel like a real team. And I feel like we're kind of getting there. There's youth, and that was really the main thing. These younger guys didn't feel connected to the older veterans who, you know, Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur installed to help coach the younger guys. It was more of like a father-son relationship and not like a friendly relationship. So it was much different. They weren't having fun. It was more of a job, in my opinion, at least. It seems like they're ready to really just have fun and let it loose and let it go. And I'm excited for this year to see what our youth, Xavier McKinney, Andrew Thomas, where these guys land and how they perform. But today, I really just want to go right into position battles because we know training camp is supposed to start on Thursday, July 23rd, as well as the Yankees opening day against the Washington Nationals. So we have a lot of sports returning, and it's amazing. It's been so long since we've had something to talk about, and finally we're getting into a position where we have more information, more stories, more news, and we can really provide the value. So, Anthony, we're going to start out with the center position. I want you to take a dive into what you think is going on there and who you think is going to end up being the starter come week one.
So I think the center position right now is the weakest position on the roster as it currently stands. And I think that's because if the Giants go into the season with Spencer Pulley as their starting center, they're in deep trouble. Spencer Pulley started one game last year, and it was against the New York Jets in Week 10, and he was a complete liability the entire game. He missed an abundance of assignments and run blocking, and he was getting thrown around by the Jets defensive tackles left and right. It was very embarrassing, actually, and I think that if he's in line to start 16 games for the Giants this year, there's no way he's going to make it throughout the whole season. At some point, he would get benched or something, and I think it should be Nick Gates as a starting center. I think when he played in limited snaps, he looked impressive, but Spencer Pulley's limited snaps looked really, really bad, and that was concerning. So I don't want to see him being the starting center going into next season.
Right. And so I agree with you. However, what I would say is Jalapio, I don't even know why he was starting to begin with. He never was a good player, even when he was healthy. And then he had the broken leg and then the torn, it was Achilles last year.
Yep.
So, you know, now he's coming back from a second significant injury, and the Giants are probably looking at him like, you can compete, but we're probably not going to go with you, which is exactly what they should be doing. You give every player an opportunity. It can't hurt to bring him into training camp and just test him out. He's been working hard to get back and really provide some value. But if he wasn't good before, coming off a torn Achilles, I can't imagine he's going to be that great now. However, that brings me to Spencer Pulley, who played in 13 games in 2018 with the Giants and 4 games last year once Jalapio went down. Pulley isn't a great player either. He's the most experienced on the roster, and that's what makes me think he might end up being the starter. But he's not my preferred choice. And then you have Nick Gates, who's never played a live rep at center before. He's been working with Derek Carr in Las Vegas under center to try and gain some familiarity and really carry that over into training camp. But that's the big question. How intense is in training camp going to be? Is he going to be able to get a lot of live reps, especially with the social distancing thing going on and players being really careful, the health protocols in play. So how does that affect his development, especially at center? And where does Shane Lemieux fit in the mold? Because he's never really played center before too. He's kind of moved around the Oregon line playing guard mostly, but center isn't a position that he's really familiar with. So what does that tell you? The Giants are probably leaning towards the most experienced guy on the roster, which is Spencer Pulley. Not my first choice, considering Jalapio managed to beat him out last year, which just blows my mind because he was already bad. So, do you think that Nick Gates develops that much during training camp to actually earn a starting position? Because it's tough for me to say, and I personally project him as the starter, but it's tough for me to sit here and say that I don't think Pulley will also be in the picture.
I think that Nick Gates last season really proved that he's versatile because he started games at both right tackle and right guard, and he was drafted to be a guard and then was penciled in as a right tackle. He's shown that he has versatility to move around the line. A lot of people say it's immensely difficult to go from a guard to a tackle position or from tackle to guard, but he did it, so why can't he go from guard to center? I don't see why not. I think that when he was playing in the games, especially against the Dolphins, he was phenomenal. I think he allowed 9 total pressures and 290 snaps, if I'm remembering correctly. So he was really solid in pass protection, and then we know he was good as a run blocker, opening holes for Saquon Barkley in Week 15 against the Dolphins. So Nick Gates, I think, is really talented. It is a little concerning that he's never played center before, but at this point, I just think, why would we settle for a guy that's played center when he's bad at center and not take a chance on a guy who could end up being really good at center just because he's never played that position? And I think that's the same thing with Shane Lemieux. I think it should just go to whoever has the most potential and has the highest upside should play the position, not the highest floor. I'd rather go for the highest ceiling.
Right, and after watching some film on Jalapio, just to give you a better insight, a lot of his issues were vision-based and really just football IQ. He would track players that were completely out of the fold. Like there would be delayed blitzes and he would just completely miss them, going right up the middle where he was supposed to be in the A gap. And that was a big concern for me because when you don't have your center seeing those delayed blitzes and really he's attaching to blockers that are already being, players and pass rushers that are already being blocked. And those delayed blitzes, he was just so bad at identifying them. So it was a lot more vision-based for me. He had decent feet. He had the upper body strength. It really just came down to the technicalities and the mental ability. With that being said, Spencer Pulley is a little bit better. I think he should have been starting to begin with. And then you have guys on the free agent market like Justin Britt, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks. He got cut. He was supposed to be paid about $10 million. And they were like, nah, he's coming off an ACL tear. We don't really want to pay him that much. The Giants could go out and be like, okay, why don't we consider bringing him in on like a minimum deal if he's willing to take that? He's coming off a significant injury. Bring him in to compete and then just incentive late in the entire contract. And that way you solidify a really important position that is affecting your entire line because the poor play of Jalapio affected Will Hernandez. And somehow, because Kevin Zeitler is just so damn good, he didn't get affected that much by it. And that's a big thing, though. Kevin Zeitler just can't do it all on his own. And then you have the right tackle spot, which we're going to get into right now, that is also an open position battle. So, Anthony, I want you to kind of break down the right tackle spot and like who is going to be competing there. We have Cam Fleming, we have Nick Gates, and we have Nate Solder, who could swap sides, and then you have Matt Parrott. And you've done a lot of research on Matt Parrott, so I want to hear what you think about that and if Parrott could actually earn a starting position at some point in the 2020 season.
I am a huge fan of Matt Parrott. That was the number one guy I wanted the Giants to draft in the 3rd round, and they did. And I was really excited when they did. But I don't think he's going to be ready to start this year. Matt Parrott is a developmental player. He's really got pretty solid technique for somebody who played at UConn. He's just a little undersized and lacks upper body strength. He was going up against much easier competition playing for UConn. So going to the NFL, he's going to have to learn how to, first of all, iron out any technical flaws that he had. And then second of all, he's got to hit the weight room. Mark Colombo is going to have to be on him and make sure that he is really putting on that upper body strength because that's going to be the difference maker for him. Mm-hmm. I think he has really solid feet, but his hand placement and then his upper body strength are really his 2 flaws. And I think that's going to take him at least a year to iron out. Mm-hmm. And then the other players at right tackle, some people believe that Andrew Thomas should go over to right tackle. I think that's a terrible idea. I think they drafted him to be a left tackle, so that's what they should put him at immediately, and not waste a year with him over at right tackle. Just have him play left tackle if you want him to play left tackle. That's the way I see it, and I think that Nate Solder's probably got the best chance of being the starting right tackle just because they're paying him so much, and I think they still believe he can bounce back and become an average tackle again. And if he can be an average tackle on the right side, then that's going to be better than whatever we had last year. But I don't know if I necessarily see it. I think that Nick Gates is actually another name you can throw into the mix here. Cameron Fleming, Nick Gates, if he doesn't get the center job, if it goes to Spencer Pulley, I think Nick Gates played really well there at right tackle last season, so maybe he could beat out Nate Solder at the right tackle position in 2020.
Right, and Nate Solder is an interesting case because we know his personal issues have been pretty problematic, considering his son was dealing with cancer, was going through treatments. That has a big effect on you, and he was driving to Boston like every weekend to get his kid treatment, chemotherapy. So how does that affect your preparation for games? How does that affect your mental state? Significantly. I'll tell you, my grandma had cancer last year, and it was really difficult. And I imagine if my kid had it, it would be equally as bad, if not exponentially worse. So dealing with something like that, I'm willing to give Solder the benefit of the doubt because in 2018, the second half of his year was phenomenal. I think that actually matches up because his son had been cleared for cancer, I believe, and then he ended up relapsing, I guess. I don't know exactly the word for it, but his kid got it again, and that's kind of where this whole thing fell apart, and he started to become a lot more inconsistent. So the Giants feel really confident about him. If you ask Dave Gettleman, if you ask them, they'll admit that he had a poor 2019, but they really feel like he has some good football left in the tank. And the major issue was he wasn't able to adapt to the Giants' style of play, especially with Eli Manning and Daniel Jones. Their dropbacks were 7-8 yards or 7-8 steps back. And you have a guy like Tom Brady who takes about 4-step dropbacks. So Nate Solder's really used to pushing guys behind Brady and Brady stepping up into the pocket because he's one of the best at maneuvering in the pocket and throwing from there. But Daniel Jones and Eli Manning dropping back further, Nate Solder's pushing his assignment right into them. So it was a little problematic for him to adapt, and I don't think he still has. And with that being said, Nick Gates also did look really good at right tackle, but he doesn't want to play right tackle. He said he prefers to play guard, interior, whether it be center, I guess we'll find out. But Cam Fleming, I like him as more of a depth piece. I don't want him to be starting because that means that we're already into our depth. We don't want to start out already utilizing our depth pieces. I want him to be ready in case an injury happens. He needs to be a supplemental piece, and that's what makes great offensive lines great. When injuries happen, you have a guy you can fill in and expect them to play at least at an average level, and that's what Cam Fleming will do at both right and left tackle. Just to bounce back to Parrott before we move on to the next position battle, I really like Parrott, and you were right, he's spot on. He's a little undersized in terms of muscle mass. I like his height. I like his frame. He just
extremely long arms too. He has like the longest arms at the combine.
Exactly. He has the longest arms. He looks like a wide receiver in an offensive tackle's body. And that's kind of what I like about him, though. He actually fits the left tackle mold better than Andrew Thomas in terms of his frame once he puts on that muscle mass. And that's why we've seen these reports pop up every now and then. Like, Andrew Thomas should be playing right tackle, and I don't think so. You don't spend a 4th overall pick to cover right tackle when your quarterback's blind spot is on the left side, and Nate Solder gave up 11 sacks last year. You just don't do it. It's malpractice, in my opinion. You take Andrew Thomas, you plug him in at left tackle, you let him develop that chemistry first. If they're going to start him at right tackle, they have to be very confident that Solder is going to be very good at left tackle or show a lot better performance this year. It could happen. Who knows? But with that being said, I agree. I think Parrott is probably a year away from having any consideration, and I think they drafted him for that reason because Solder's contract, he's like $16 million in dead cap or something, double-digit number. And next year, he drops down to about $6 million in dead cap. So we can imagine they will probably release him, and they'll look at Parrott and be like, hey, are you ready? Are you ready to fill this spot? And then they can cut their cap casualties down significantly. Their cap hit and salary space is going to be wide open. So that gives the Giants a lot of ability to go out and sign someone for the secondary, a linebacker, a pass rusher, even another offensive lineman that they have more confidence in. So these are the type of things that we have to think about going into training camp. Will Nate Solder opt out of the season? That was an article I wrote the other day. That's a serious concern for me, because like I said, his son has cancer. And that's a serious liability, especially for a full contact sport like football. Does Nate Solder decide, I don't want to play this year because I'm risking too much of my family? He would also be risking $16 million. So there's the alternative side to things. What do you do there? I'm not exactly sure. It's really his decision to make, and it's really coming to crunch time because he doesn't have that much time left to make the decision. In my opinion, I think he will play. Do you think the same?
Yeah, I think he will play, but it would make sense if he chose not to. And I also I like the point you brought up where he had to adjust to the different drop backs, and I think that might be why he makes more sense at right tackle because he can push them and Daniel Jones can actually see it rather
Yeah.
than just having them pushed right into him. He could see where they're being pushed and then navigate through the pocket himself. While if Andrew Thomas is playing left tackle, maybe he is already on the same page with Daniel Jones in terms of the drop back because Daniel Jones is a young player. He's still trying to learn from the college to NFL transition, and Andrew Thomas is going to be going through the same thing. So they might just be on the same page with the dropbacks, but Daniel Jones's vision might be improved having Nate Solder on the right side.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's a really good point because Daniel Jones and Tom Brady are vastly different in terms of pocket awareness. Brady is one of the best at feeling pressure on his back, moving up into the pocket, holding the football with two hands. And that was something Daniel Jones just completely struggled with last year. He was holding it with one hand, or he wasn't holding it strong enough. He wasn't big enough. He gained 9 pounds of muscle mass, so that should help. And,
Should.
his awareness just wasn't there. We saw he's fumbled 18 times, losing 11 of them. So hopefully he can improve upon that. It looks like he's been working very, very hard, and he said it should be an easy fix. So we'll take his word for granted at this point, but we'll hope for the best. But on to the next position battle, nickel corner. This is a really interesting one because it really coincides with the number 2 corner spot if DeAndre Baker's legal issues don't get ironed out.
Yeah.
And I know you're a big Darnay Holmes guy, and I really, really am excited to talk about him because I have some cool stuff that I want to say, but I want to start with your opinion. And the nickel corner, we have Julian Love, we got Darnay Holmes. You could even throw Corey Ballantyne in there. We got Grant Haley. And then we have Chris Williamson out of Minnesota who will be competing for a spot. He was a 7th rounder. So, in your opinion, who is this nickel corner and why?
I think that Darnay Holmes is instantly the top candidate for the nickel corner position, but as you mentioned, it's really contingent on what happens with DeAndre Baker. Because to me, Darnay Holmes could succeed on the outside. He could be the cornerback too. But he doesn't need to be if we have a cornerback too. And if he doesn't need to be, I think instantly he can already be an above average nickel corner. He might struggle and have to get used to being a smaller, undersized corner on the outside. But I think he would instantly be a good nickel corner and have that position set for us for at least the remainder of the season and so on. But if for some reason Darnay Holmes doesn't get that position, I look at other guys like Grant Haley. Grant Haley was great in run defense, but terrible in coverage. I think that he still has a role with the team, though. I don't think that he should be the starting nickel, but goal line situations or 3rd and short, 4th and short, where it's likely that they're going to run or just throw short, I think that's where Grant Haley makes sense because he can come through and make a clutch tackle right at the sticks, and you can expect him not to get ran through by Ezekiel Elliott on a 3rd and short. Grant Haley can make that tackle, whereas Darnay Holmes, smaller, hasn't really proven to be an excellent tackler yet. Maybe he won't make that play. And then Corey Ballantyne, I thought actually played better on the outside last preseason, but they played him in the slot this season, and I remember the Bears game where he just got torched. I think he led up like 70, 80 yards to Allen Robinson playing in the slot. So Darnay Holmes to me is like the shoe-in number 1 nickel corner, but it's all contingent on what happens at cornerback too and whether or not DeAndre Baker will be present for the season.
Absolutely. And I want to blow your mind really quickly, and probably everyone listening to this right now has no idea. Everyone's already penciled in Darnay Holmes to the nickel corner spot, and why, I don't know. It's really actually starting to get on my nerves because, Darnay Holmes is 195 pounds, 5'10", right? How big is Janoris Jenkins? Can you tell me?
He's about the same. I think he's 5'11" at the most.
5'10", 190 pounds. He's smaller than Darnay Holmes. So anybody that thinks that Darnay Holmes is cemented at nickel corner, stop. It's not true. He was projected there because of his speed and athleticism and because he struggled last year. He had a high ankle sprain, and he played through it against the doctor's orders. He played through it. And his stats did not even remotely show how good of a player he really is. And he was a captain at UCLA. The guy is a really just all around great player and great human being. And he's bigger than Janoris Jenkins, who's been our number one corner for like 40 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kick that to the curb, that whole concept that he can't play on the outside, because he absolutely can. And
I completely agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with that
I
being
wrote
said,
that article like a month ago, and
Mhm.
I argued the same thing. I think it was Kyle Krabs of the Draft Network, who's one of the best draft analysts on that website, was saying he's a boundary corner, not a nickel corner. And I started to watch him, and I agreed with him. I was like, I don't see him being that small. Like, he looks small on the field, but he plays bigger than he is. So
And he's
I think
strong.
that he
He's
could
pretty
definitely
fit,
succeed.
too.
He is. He could succeed on the outside. I believe it.
I think so. He has the speed. He really just needs to have that quick twitch and the ability to really man mark wide receivers, because that's my biggest concern. Is he looks like he's fast, but I don't know how smooth he is. I just need to see the smoothness, and I really think he has the capabilities. I think he has the tangible traits, and he certainly has the mental IQ. I mean, he graduated from college in 3 years. The guy's smart. He's a good person. He's intelligent, and he loves the game of football. And he's been working out with Saquon. He's been working out with Jabril Peppers. Like I said, back to the youth agenda that I mentioned before, these guys are working together. They're training together. They're getting better together. They're not coaching each other. There is a big difference between your veterans coaching your younger players and your younger players developing and growing as a cohesive unit. It's a much different concept. So that is what I like about Darnay Holmes. And I think that he is a prime candidate to beat out Sam Beal for that number 2 corner spot if DeAndre Baker is not able to go. Don't sleep on him in that position, because I really like it. Julian Love in another case is, in my opinion, more of a utility man. I don't think he's a starter, and I like that, because, like, think about baseball. If you have Aaron Judge, and behind Aaron Judge you don't have anybody that can possibly supplement him, you lost a huge piece. Same thing applies to football. If you lose your starting free safety, your starting strong safety, and behind him you don't have a good piece to plug and play, you're going to have a serious weakness, and teams are going to attack that over and over and over again. And Joe Judge, our new head coach, is coming in here and he's saying, I want players to be multifaceted. I want them to be able to play multiple positions. And you look at a guy like Julian Love, and if Xavier McKinney goes down, knock on wood, if Jabril Peppers goes down, knock on wood, if our slot corner goes down, knock on wood, you can take Julian Love and plug him in any of those spots and feel comfortable that he's going to be able to play at least an average level. Same concept with Cameron Fleming. So let me just say, we're at a position now in the rebuild that they are really starting to round out these depth pieces, which is a very, very good sign for a rebuilding team, because injuries are prevalent. They're going to happen in the NFL. And when you have players who can supplement them, it's mind-blowingly a difference maker. Think about all the players that Super Bowl teams. There's always injuries on those Super Bowl teams all the time. Like, if you don't have Nick Foles when Carson Wentz goes down, the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, these things happen, and you have to be ready for them. And the Giants are finally building out the depth, and they noticed that with the linebacker corps, which I want to dive into right now, at middle linebacker and outside linebacker in the draft. They brought in like 4 or 5 linebackers. To really come in here, T.J. Brunson, Tay Crowder, Cam Brown, even Coughlin. So these are moves here to supplement positions that were super weak. And by spending all those 7th-round picks, you increase your probability of finding someone that could supplement an injury down the road. So that brings me to my next point at middle linebacker. Do you think Ryan Connolly is like the man, or do you think David Mayo is a pretty, can compete for that spot?
See, that's tough for me, because I think that Ryan Connolly would be the man if he wasn't injured last season. I think now he's kind of a big question mark. Some players are not the same coming back from a torn ACL. He tore his ACL in week 4, but in those first 4 games, 3.5 technically, he was phenomenal. He was definitely the best inside linebacker on the team, or at least he was playing like it. He was good in coverage. He was good as a run defender, and he was really exciting. It looked like a 5th-round gem that Dave Gettleman found, but then that injury happened. So now here we are, fast forward almost a whole year later. where is he? Is he completely healthy? Is he ready to return? I haven't heard a whole lot. He said that he's going to be ready by camp, but now camp is just about here, and I haven't really heard anything about it. So I don't know if he's going to be ready, and if he is ready, is he going to be the same player? Is he going to be ready for a full workload and ready to start and play a full game? I don't know. I guess it's going to be up to the coaching staff, but I have to expect it's going to be Blake Martinez as the main inside linebacker and then David Mayo behind him, simply just because of the big question mark with Ryan Connolly's health and whether or not he's going to return as the same player. But if he is the same player and the injury isn't that bad, it's not nagging him, he's all good, then he should definitely start there because he was phenomenal in those first 4 games last year. And I'm really excited to see if he comes back from this injury, how he can develop and progress and just get better year by year.
Right. No, and I really like Connolly. Seeing him last year really just assured me that we have a potential guy that can fit that second middle linebacker role next to Blake Martinez. And in 2019, just to give you guys a little bit more insight into what he accomplished in just 4 games, he had 20 combined tackles, 1 sack, 2 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. So those are pretty damn good numbers for a rookie linebacker coming out of Wisconsin in the 5th round. That's not heard of very often. And his instincts, if you remember, were some of the best I've seen coming out and just starting immediately. He was diagnosing running plays and he was shooting into the backfield at such a high level that I hadn't seen in a very long time. There's not many players that can do that. And while he did miss some tackles, it doesn't really matter because those are the type of things that it's gonna happen when you're a young player and you're trying to learn a defensive system and trying to learn the speed and physicality. He was just maybe a step behind a lot of times. And what that tells me is he's just not used to the speed yet. He's just not anticipating the right timing of it. But he was getting through the hole. He just was a little bit lagging. And in 2020, if he's back to full health, and a lot of players come back from ACL injuries and are totally fine, circa Todd Gurley and having that insane season after his ACL tear. So I think that there's no question in my mind he can be a focal point for the Giants on defense, be a difference maker. And might I add, he's really good in coverage too, especially covering those running backs in the flat. He's fast. He had a 57.1 completion percentage against. He only allowed 19 yards. And on 7 targets, he allowed 4 completions. So we've seen what he can do in a small sample size. Like you said, no news has come out about him, so we don't really know what his status is just yet, but he said he would be ready for training camp. Hopefully that is the case. And then you have David Mayo right behind him. And I like David Mayo. He came out of nowhere last year. He was in Carolina before for 4 seasons, and he played every game between 2017 and 2018. Even last year, he played in every single game. He didn't start all of them. He started in 13 games last year, but he did record 2 sacks, 82 combined tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, 2 quarterback hits. I mean, again, he's terrible in coverage, but you're not employing a guy like that to be a guy, covering tight ends and running backs. He is there to stop the run. But he improved incredibly from Carolina in 2018 to last season. He had a 26.3% missed tackle rate in 2018, and he only missed 10%, or rather 11% last season. So that's a really big improvement. And I liked what I saw. He was tenacious. He was aggressive. He was plugging holes. And I think it gives Blake Martinez more of an ability to man cover, which he wasn't doing in Green Bay because they were using some sort of mesh zone scheme that really wasn't giving him the freedom to man up with tight ends or running backs or whatever it might be. And he was caught lagging behind because he was playing zone. He wasn't playing man. So when you see him in all those bad coverage bad coverage plays, a lot of it was because that was just how Green Bay was valuing their middle linebackers, just not really that great. So do you think that Mayo or Connolly, just to finalize this position battle, who wins this one?
I'm going to go with Mayo just because there's less uncertainty. I think Mayo we know he is a good run defender. We know he also is he's bad in pass coverage. That's factual, but he had one of the highest PFF grades as a run defender last year. I think he had an elite rating of 92. So that's pretty solid, and you know what he can do. So if you just have him do that one thing, like Joe Judge said in his introductory press conference, we're not trying to fit square pegs in the round holes. We just want players to do what they're good at. Just have David Mayo be a run defender and a pure run defender. Don't drop him into coverage very often, and you can make him a pretty solid player in that aspect. But then with Connolly, I think that he's so versatile, he can do both. He was really good at shooting the gaps and getting in the backfield, but he was also really solid in coverage. But it's just such a huge question mark with him, whether he's going to be healthy enough to sustain a 16-game season. So I think that I would probably go with Mayo to start the season and work Connolly in slowly until eventually by the end of the year, I'd have him as the starting middle linebacker opposite of Blake Martinez just because of his versatility being so much more valuable than David Mayo just being able to do one thing.
Right, and I think that's a good plan. I think easing Connolly into the season, also matchup based. I think Martinez and Mayo are similar players. They're both primarily run stoppers. They rack up tackles. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for the Giants to do something like this, to say, okay, this is a pass heavy team. Let's say they're playing Kansas City, just for giggles.
Right.
You're going to put Connolly out there because he can cover Travis Kelce, or at least a running back coming out of the flat. I would probably put Peppers on Kels. But
Or
if you're
McKinney.
playing a run heavy team, let's say like the Carolina Panthers with Christian McCaffrey, if you're playing a run heavy team and you're not anticipating Kyle Allen, or rather Teddy Bridgewater now, throwing the ball a ton, you're going to put Mayo in there because you really just want to shut down the run. You don't want to let teams establish the run. So I could see them saying, okay, Mayo, you're going to play predominantly first downs because probability is teams are going to run the ball on first down. And then Connolly's going to swap in on second and third down to be a better, just coverage guy. I think that's something that they might do. Just create some more diversity and use guys situationally. We'll see what happens. This defense, I wouldn't expect this defense to be at a very high level right out of the gate because Patrick Graham's defense is very diverse. It's very intricate, detailed. It's going to take some time for these guys to mesh. It's not an easy scheme. They run a lot of man coverage 50% of the time. It's very reliant on safeties and linebackers moving up to the line of scrimmage, dropping back into coverage, stunts, fake, delayed blitzes, fake blitzes, dropping back into coverage. These are things that take time, especially when you're working with a lot of young, new guys, and Xavier McKinney. Even Connolly is essentially a rookie. He's coming in and learning a whole new system now. So there's a lot to do. And I think there are going to be struggles in the first year, but they're going to be good struggles to have. It's going to be learning based. They have the physical talent. These guys have the talent. That's the difference. Last year, Ogletree was not talented. We just didn't have the guys who went out there and you could be confident in every week. So now I feel pretty good about the players that we have. And now it's just about, building them up, developing them, and really seeing the cohesion. But for the last position battle, I want to hit on the last wide receiver spot. This is going to be an interesting position battle because we have a bunch of guys here, and in a really, really deep draft class for receivers, the Giants didn't pick anybody. That was a little concerning to me because I was expecting them to, but they still managed to land Austin Mack, Derek Dillon, and my guy Benjamin Victor from Ohio State. And Victor is a very, very, very interesting player. He didn't start any games until his senior season with Ohio State, and last year he had 6 touchdowns, 573 yards, and 35 receptions. So it was a big step up from his other 3 seasons. And I really like him because he has just unparalleled length. His arms are so long. He reminds me a lot of AJ Green if AJ Green was a lot slower. Victor is not a fast receiver. I think he is a blanket. He's a blanket on the intermediate passing game. I don't trust him running streaks down the side of the field. And that's where Corey Coleman, in my opinion, kind of beats him out in that speed department. But coming off another major injury, he suffered a torn ACL last training camp. Anthony, what do you think is going to happen in this position battle? Who do you think wins this one?
I think it's really going to come down to the training camp and who can, first of all, remain healthy throughout the whole entirety of training camp, and then whoever performs the best. I think that there's obviously more potential with a guy like Benjamin Victor, who's like 6'4", has these really lanky arms and can make those contested catches, but the problem is, can he separate at the next level? Can he get open? You mentioned his lack of speed. That could be a problem. Can he actually get open against man coverage? And Corey Coleman probably can, but we've also seen him have some drops, so it's really going to be a pros and cons thing. But also at the same time, I'll mention that I think there's going to be very few situations where the Giants have 4 receivers on the field. And I think that there's going to be even less situations where they have 3 receivers on the field. I think they're going to be running a lot more 2 tight end sets and a lot more two running back sets where they have a fullback in there. So I think that we're going to just overall see less wide receivers in this offense with Jason Garrett. But at the same rate, depth is always important. And can you really rely on a guy like Corey Coleman to be a depth piece when he's hurt nearly every season?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure. So I think that the undrafted rookies that we ended up signing, I thought they were excellent signing just because of potential. Giants fans should know better than anybody that undrafted wide receivers have unlimited potential and be excellent players. Victor Cruz, he was an undrafted free agent. We signed him. He was amazing in preseason, tore his ACL, comes back the next season. We win the Super Bowl, and we wouldn't have won it without him. He was the best slot receiver in the NFL that season.
Nick Gates.
Exactly. Nick Gates is another that's a great example. Maybe he'll step in and be the best right tackle in the league this season, or right guard or center. I don't know. But it's a good point, and I think that it could be a similar situation with these wide receivers that you mentioned. I was a big Victor fan because when I watch all that Dwayne Haskins tape, here and there, Victor would pop out to me along with KJ Hill, but I think he's on the Chargers. And then I think one of the guys we signed was extremely fast, right? It's either
Derek Dillon, LSU.
Exactly, yeah. We could use some extra speed. Yeah, well, that would be great too. Corey Ballantyne was decent there last season, but that's definitely another position that is actually going to have a little bit of a position battle.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I am totally against using any starting players as your punt returner now. After Jabril Peppers went down last year because of that hit he took against the Bears, he had a hip contusion or whatever happened. He missed the rest of the season, and that's not acceptable. I'm not willing to risk our best players because of a punt return. Put out a guy like Derek Dillon, put out a guy like Javon Leak, a guy like Corey Coleman, fast guys who can pick up a few yards. And can make plays. Like that's really what you want. You want to utilize your number 4 receiver as a punt returner. That's what they're there for. They're not there to be starting wide receivers. They're there to help you in case of an injury and to return punts. So that's really why I think if Corey Coleman's going to win that battle, it's going to be because of his diversity. Benjamin Victor isn't returning punts or kicks anytime soon, let me tell you.
That's true.
So if there's any reason that Coleman wins this, it's because of that fact alone. With that being said, I love Victor. I really think he has a future in the NFL, and I think the Giants, if they don't at least keep him on the practice squad, it would be bad news Bears. So there's actually one thing I want to talk about before we sign off here. I was talking to my friend Jeff Nowak. He works in New Orleans, and he reports on the Saints, and he was doing some film study on Evan Engram against the Saints, and he was telling me like, it's crazy how badly the Giants utilize him, and he shouldn't be a tight end. He should be a wide receiver. And the reason is he's terrible at blocking. And the way that the Saints utilize, what's his name, Benjamin Watson, that's kind of how they should use Evan Engram in the passing game, at least, because he is so good. And he actually compared the 40-yard dash times between him and like 3 other like really good wide receivers, and he's like better than a lot of them. He has incredible speed, he has good size, and he has decent hands. He's gotten better with the hands department. I think he'd be better off just playing straight up in the slot. I know we have Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard there, but I really like him just in that role. And with that being said, I would love to see the Giants use some 22 personnel. So 2 tight ends and 2 running backs. What do you think about this? You have Evan Engram and you have Caden Smith. Evan Ingram's in the slot as your de facto number 2 tight end. Caden Smith is lined up as a blocker, or you have Levine Toilolo there, depending on what you want to do. And then you have Deion Lewis and you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. That creates so many problems. How on earth, as a defense, are you able to figure out what you're going to do with Saquon, Evan Engram in the slot, and Deion Lewis in the backfield? Because Deion Lewis is primarily a pass-catching back, and Saquon can do it all. He can do it all. You're going to create so many issues. And then you have a guy like Darius Slayton, who's opening up and extending the field deep. What do you do there? How do you physically stop that? The Giants need to get more creative. We saw way too much 11 and 12 personnel last year, mostly just 11 personnel.
74% of the time Pat Shurmur ran 11 personnel. It was the second highest rate in the NFL. Yeah,
and with that being said, I'd like to mention that you can't win them all with the injuries. The injuries certainly hurt because Evan Engram was out, Rhett Ellison was out. that Daniel Jones didn't have a single game with all of his players available. So it's really tough to sit here and say that Pat Shurmur really had a choice, because he didn't at a certain point. But with that being said, Jason Garrett is going to come in here and really make a difference, I think. Mm-hmm. And I hope that they employ more 22 personnel and really just open up this offensive scheme to creativity, and bring something that's different, because teams always knew what the Giants were going to do week in and week out, and it was terrible to see.
Yeah, that's interesting, though, the point that you brought up with Evan Engram, because I've had the opinion that he's a tight end, and he is a great tight end because of his athleticism. That's what makes him a matchup problem. But I don't think that his athleticism necessarily makes him a matchup problem at wide receiver. But we wouldn't know, because we haven't seen him take any reps there. I would love to see him split out wide or in the slot, as you mentioned. And you mentioned that you think that he'd be a great slot, but I think that he'd be better on the outside because of his giant frame. I think that, some 50-50 balls could definitely go Evan Engram's way. He would probably just need to refine his route running a little bit, even though it's exponentially better than most tight ends in the league. But at the receiver position, I'm not sure how he would stack up with an outside cornerback. In terms of his size, he would win that, but would he be able to separate? That's always the biggest question for me. And I got to watch more film on him to really evaluate his blocking, but I've always thought that he was a bit of an underrated blocker. I think a lot of people say that he's a very bad blocker, and I don't think so. I think he's just about average, and you want your tight end to be above average is the thing.
Yeah, and I think Evan Engram, he's gotten better at blocking, but they really want him because of his release. His release off the line of scrimmage, his chip is good, but the problem is in the running game, he's a liability. And that's why they brought in a guy like Toy Lolo, because Evan Engram isn't big enough. He can make blocks downfield at the second level against wide receivers, or rather corners and smaller safeties. But when he's trying to block offensive linemen and linebackers, he gets bulldozed most of the time. So that's kind of why I'm sitting on the maybe they should try him at wide receiver look. I guess there's no preseason this year. It's kind of hard to tell what they might do. But in another year, if we had one, he's going into the 5th year next year, right? So not next year, but in 2021. So there's a lot to be unfolded here. There's a lot to look into, and players that could play multiple positions and arguments to be made. But thank you for everyone for tuning in to the latest episode of Fireside Giants with Anthony and I. We are ready for training camp to start. I know you guys are. Yeah. Baseball's about to get started again, and we are going to be bringing the best. So we got some insider stuff. We're going to have all the information. We're going to hope to do at least 1 episode per week, maybe 2, depending on how much is going on, what kind of news. And obviously, we'll have the videos on YouTube as well. And Anthony is coming out with a sick Saquon Barkley video. So if you've made it this long in the episode, I'm giving you the hint now that he's coming out with like a Martin Scorsese style and Saquon Barkley film. I swear, it's like I saw like 30 seconds of it, and it's sick. Like it's like a movie with a film breakdown involved. So you're gonna learn a lot, and you're also going to enjoy some just incredible visuals.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned for that video. I've been putting in a ton of effort to make it, trying to perfect it. I'm trying to make it as good as possible. I did send Alex the intro that I was pretty proud of. It was pretty cool, but the real meat and potatoes comes later on in that video when I do some breakdowns. I really implemented some new stuff to really refine the way that we do the breakdowns on this channel. They're going to be way more easier to follow along with, and way more informative, with plays drawn out on the screen and everything like that. So stay tuned, putting a ton of effort into it. It's going to be an awesome video. And thank you guys for tuning in once again to Fireside Giants.